Today's topic is From Demographics to Dividends, looking at inclusive growth in MENA. This is, of course, UAE Innovation Week, so this ties in nicely with some of the results of the report. And we will be looking specifically at what the implications are for young people in the region, but also looking at what we can do more in order to support youth in the UAE region. What we've seen from the report is a focus on creating domestic demand, domestic consumption, and domestic investment. So really trying to make sure that local stakeholders have a say in where growth goes, and it's not just associated with elite, either economic groups or political groups.
Inclusive growth is all about a growth model that is genuinely inclusive. It's when a country grows, the middle class in the country grows with it. It's growth that is accessible to the wider population. And say, is this growth coming from a sustainable, structured model? Do they have access? Can people drive to jobs? Do they have ways of developing entrepreneurship? Do they have a good ICT system? Do they have a good basic healthcare system and educational system? Do they have good rule of law? The only country, and not just because we hear this is the numbers talking, the only country that out of the Middle East and Africa, across all the board, and you see there's a huge disparity, by the way, between Africa and the Middle East and North Africa. So African countries are still lagging behind on many, many levels. The UAE now in our compound index is only a few points away from OECD countries. So at one point in the near future, if things continue the way they are, and demonstrated by the Innovation Week we live today, things seem to be continuing the way they are, the UAE could break out of this region's development model. What we talk about in the UAE is how can this be pushed forward, how can it be made more sustainable, and what other things you start betting on. And while we were writing this report, which was earlier this year, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed stood up in the government summit and gave what I really enjoyed, a fantastic speech talking about saying goodbye to the last barrel of oil. And he painted a lovely picture saying, in 50 years, we're going to throw a happy party. How can we bet on that demographic to power our future growth? How can we turn them all into the middle class? This region has to start integrating and thinking about its economic issues as one block. So that's the title of our report, Turning the Youth Burden into Dividend.
Tell us, what do you think is the value of inclusive growth, and particularly around youth and in your work in the region?
Two aspects for us that are important. First is you have to have the youth and all the entire population included in the broader ecosystem of the economy, which means financial inclusion. So it's a series of building blocks, not a single one, but for us, I think the cornerstone is get them financially included, give them the platforms, and then you take that forward.
Is this something new, inclusive growth, looking at how we create opportunities for, or is this something, are we just talking about more sustainable economic growth?
What we need to do is address a couple of key factors. It's moving away from the current mentality of the youth being seen as a burden across the Arab world, and as the report rightly says, to seeing them as more of an approach whereby they are seen as, they can become a dividend. There's a lack of appetite for risk. There's a lack of appetite for innovation and entrepreneurialism across the Arab world. Yes, the UAE is leading the way in terms of innovation, trying to change the mentality of a waged person, a waged earner, to try and move them more towards the innovative realm.
Give us, what keeps you optimistic around the government's understanding of the need for legislative reform?
The new school is that the government works as a facilitator to promote, the the private sector to do more jobs and to create more jobs, and to take, to be more in charge. So we can't just say that we can do specific work in here through, let's say, laws and regulations, but also we have to work and partner with the private sector through many things in the process. Youth, actually, they are part of the process of three phases. One is when they are in schools and universities, and we have to really focus on how we can educate them and promote and kind of encourage them to think differently. And then the SME role, where we have to find laws and regulations that really helps and encourage for the good failure or to take risks. If you look at actually the young generation, why they don't want to get involved in doing business and to live their own story is because they are afraid of what if we fail.
Yeah. Education itself that whole sector, the government needs to relook at what does education mean, and does it always have to be just about SME and entrepreneurship? What other skill sets are required to move from what I said, a manufacturing economy, to a service-driven economy?
It's transparency first and foremost. Secondly, I think it's realizing that the majority of youth, as I have seen across the MENA region, are ill-equipped to understand what their options are.
Young people in the region not wanting to share good ideas because there's fear that they can't protect them.
Yeah.
Are we making progress in terms of protecting intellectual property?
So in the UAE, we have very strong IP, to be honest with you, like intellectual property laws, like we have good companies, copyrights, trademarks, patents.
We have to perform a bit of a gap analysis in terms of the local level, local government level, and the private sector level. As I mentioned earlier, not everyone will go to university, not everyone will go to college, not everyone will become a Richard Branson.
UAE is a little different, and parts of the GCC are a little different. But if I put this in a wider MENA context, or even a MEA Africa context, things change. Because you just require 3-4 really innovative ideas that spur employment to the next level. The good news is we're having debates like this, which means it's there in our conscious minds, and therefore the journey has begun.
Maybe involve more entrepreneurs in the discussion process. If we involve entrepreneurs as well in that process, then it will be easier to learn from the experiences and do something that actually works rather than thinking more on theoretical lines and experimentation.
We as entrepreneurs, I'm witnessing my own company. What we're getting today from nationals are rotating within the same fields. Somebody quitting a job to come to me, but I'm not creating new jobs for newcomers. Are we giving opportunities for the new youth to what do we say, to coach them, to mentor them?
You need to get that right balance of actually ensuring that the very best first comes in. If you restrict it from the beginning, you won't get all of the stuff that you require to get in. Corporates have to go beyond CSR.
We have to move away from a negative multiplier effect in terms of unemployment to a positive multiplier effect. How do we bridge that gap? We have to then look at possibly apprenticeships, on-the-job training that gets the youth into some kind of quasi-employment until they go into fully fledged employment.
The gap between what is offered in the job levels and the capabilities and qualification of the people in hand, it's growing and it's fast forward, and people find it very challenging.
The missing word here is incentives, because incentives is what drives people to create. الحاجة أم الاختراع. Our incentive system is completely hardwired against enterprise and entrepreneurship.
We've done some great work with you in the past around financial literacy. What do you think we can do more of together, Emirates Foundation and MasterCard?
We're now in a position where we can actually create a formal program with somebody like you. And let's just take that.
Promoting. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us here today. I hope that you will continue to join our business breakfast forums in the future. Bring to us topics, subjects, if you think need to be discussed. We're very happy to have people proactively suggest. And finally, a big thanks to ESR for coming and being with us today to help us find our way through that research, and also to all of our panelists. Thanks to all of you for being with us.